Well, literacy development is critical to students' academic performance in school because most classes have something to do with reading and writing. There are vocabulary words that kids have to know for math class, for example. And in some of our research, we found that a student's literacy achievement accounts for as much as 70% of the variance in students' science performance in grades 5, 8, and in high school. So we know that there are long-term consequences of not being able to develop adequate reading skills to support academic learning. In life, there are also consequences if students don't develop adequate skills. We know that low levels of literacy are linked to higher rates of dropout, higher rates of juvenile offending, and eventual adult incarceration, and difficulties with employment. So in this era of being college and career ready, we're concerned about the literacy performance of all students for their success, not only while they're with us in K-12 settings, but also what happens to them outside of our classrooms. It is possible to close achievement gaps with a lot of concentrated effort and being able to catch students early on. We have a much higher success rate of closing gaps when we catch students very early in their first years of school and work in a really concentrated way to provide the right kinds of experiences for them in the general education classroom, as well as in any sort of reading intervention or other kinds of supports that, based on a student's needs or background, they may require. It gets harder to close the gap the longer we let that gap sort of fester. The gaps are quite small, or at least not as wide as they are in middle school when students first enter. There's only so far apart that a kindergartner or a first grade student could be from more capable peers. But by the time you get into middle school and high school, the gaps are quite wide, as many as 7 grade levels of difference in reading ability by middle school, for example, and that makes it ever more challenging to close. We find that years of intervention for adolescents are required to really move the needle, and we're not sure if we can ever fully close the gap once students are in adolescence. So the key is to catch kids early and to provide all of the right kinds of experiences for them in the elementary grades. I think school boards can become educated on the science of reading and what we mean by good quality reading instruction. By the nature of it being a school board, not everybody's coming from an education background. And so school board members might have had different conversations with different people who have a certain philosophy or who saw one child be really successful with a particular reading program. And it's easy to assume that that must be what has to happen for all kids. So really understanding the nature of how reading develops and what are the experiences we want all students to have versus the kinds of experience that certain students profit from, I think could really benefit school board members in understanding when members of their constituency or different parents approach them and say, why aren't we doing this? Or our focus should be on that. And asking for data. What's the evidence of impact of what's happening in the schools? We look at test results quite often and we think we know everything about what that means about a school, but we don't. I think we have to dig deeper into those scores to understand what's going on. What are the programs that are in place? What is the design of the literacy block in elementary, for example? Because it's not just the materials. A lot of people think if we just buy this program, it'll solve the situation. And I think it would be easy for a school board member to fall into that role where you're looking at the budget, you're looking at how expenditures are being made, and not really thinking about how does this fit with our overall literacy plan and with what we know about what creates a good experience for students.